Hey everyone, this is Fawn with Navigating Gluten Free. And today I just wanted to talk about different ingredients you might not have thought of to look for on your ingredient labels. So I'm talking today about just what you might find on ingredient labels. What are the different forms of wheat, barley, rye. So the problem really is that while we might find products that say gluten-free, there are all of these requirements around what they need to be in order to have that label. And some places just won't go through that. And we kind of like, well, gosh, you know, it should be gluten-free, right? And so going over that is really important. And knowing what you're looking for on the label is really important as well. Okay? So I came up with a list of 46 ingredients that you might want to look for on your food ingredient labels. Now, I want to caution that just because this ingredient is on a label doesn't necessarily mean that it is not gluten-free product. What it means is that there is a potential that it is not. And so if you're looking at a food label and it says that it contains one of these products, then you will want to look for that gluten-free label. Especially when these are on there, I really try to look for a certified gluten-free label. Okay? All right, so, and I have my post here. I will link it down below, but I'm just referring to this as I go through because I can't even remember what I put on there sometimes. And these are just all items that I've known about, and just because I have experience with this, right? I've looked through this stuff. I've gone to online forums. I have looked up the ingredients over and over and over again, and I have just, you know, put together and compiled this whole list. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each item going through. I just kind of want to, you know, go through that. So first we have yeast extract, just because that it might be made with malt, which is our number 2 item. Malt is made from barley, so anything that says malt, double check. But because there are some gluten-free malts, you can do gluten-free malt, but you need to assume that malt is made with gluten, with barley, okay? So we have the yeast extract, we have the malt. Soy sauce is usually made with wheat, so we need to be careful of that. Modified food starch is made with corn or wheat. So if it doesn't specify, double check for that gluten-free label. Vinegar. This was one that I didn't find for a long time, but vinegar's made with grains usually. I always use like red wine vinegar or rice vinegar. Apple cider vinegar, of course, is my favorite. And so I just do that, and I just avoid the white vinegar. And so if it says vinegar on a label, you just have to be really careful and look for that gluten-free label again. Plant or vegetable protein. That is actually, gluten is a protein. They extract the gluten from it, and then they say, here you go, this is a plant protein. And it is pure gluten. So be very cautious of anything that says plant or vegetable protein. There are gluten-free ones, but there are also ones that are pure gluten, so be careful. Teriyaki sauce, because it can include soy. Spelt is one that comes up a lot on suggestions for when people want to be on a gluten-free or low gluten diet, because spelt does have less gluten than wheat flour. But it's less than in terms of it's not as easy to bake with. And so it's not less than in terms of your body's going to be okay if you have it, right? Especially if you're celiac. So spelt is wheat. That's the important thing. Okay, semolina. Semolina is a wheat flour. Farina, usually in the US we see it for things like cream of wheat. It's wheat. Graham flour is a wheat flour. Durum is wheat. Emmer, wheat. Farro, wheat. Khorasan. And I am going to say I might be mispronouncing some of these, but we'll just go with it. Like I said, I will link it down below so you can get all the spelling and everything like that. So Khorasan wheat It's just another strain of wheat. Einkorn, another strain of wheat. And you just might, it's rare to see these on packaging, but you might see them there, and just know that that is. Oats is a whole conversation itself, but just know if you see oats on a package, you need to make sure that it is labeled certified gluten-free, not just gluten-free, certified gluten-free, because oats does not contain gluten, but it has a very high chance of gluten contamination. Okay. Couscous is not a grain, it's a pasta. I didn't know that for a long time. And I think a lot of people, other people didn't either. Couscous is a pasta. It is made with wheat flour. It is not gluten-free. I haven't seen a gluten-free couscous, but I guess there could be one. So just, you know, you could look and make sure it's a gluten-free one. Kamut is actually a brand of flour. It's a brand of the Khorasan wheat, but you do see just the kamut on there sometimes. Bulgur is wheat. Beer. If you see beer on a label, assume that it is made with wheat, barley, rye, all those things in there. There are gluten-free beers. I love some of these gluten-free beer brands for cooking with. The one I always used on my food cart was Groundbreaker Brewing in Portland, Oregon. And they have some amazing people that work with them. And they have just a huge variety of, I'm surprised, a huge variety. So there are great gluten-free beers, but if you see beer on a label, caution, 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 right? And it needs to be certified gluten-free if that's the case. If you see just the word flour by itself, we're not talking when it says like brown rice flour or something like that, but if you just see the word flour, you have to assume that's wheat flour. And 99% of the time, that's what it's going to be. 99.9%. I would even say, like, I just don't want to go to that 100%, but it's going to be wheat flour that they're referring to as flour. Pasta, again, if it just says pasta and this doesn't say, you know, rice pasta or other things like that, it has got to be assumed that you've got wheat. Seitan, that it goes back to that plant protein. Seitan is a plant protein. It is, and that is the one that is pure gluten. So be very, very, very cautious. This is just not gluten-free. It's not going to have a gluten-free version. It's just not gluten-free. Natural flavorings could have malt in some of them. Some of them do have malt, so you just have to be really careful about that one. And make sure that if it says natural flavorings, that it is a gluten-free product. If it just lists spices, so we're not talking about when something lists, you know, chili powder and garlic powder on it. No, if it just says spices as an item, then it just has that potential to have gluten in it, because gluten is just used as a filler, unfortunately. And so just make sure that the product's labeled gluten-free if that's the case. Dextrin or maltodextrin could be made from wheat or corn. Double check before you use that product. You'll want to look for that gluten-free label, certified gluten-free label, preferably. Breadcrumbs, lots of great gluten-free breadcrumbs. I love the Panko brand myself, but if it just says breadcrumbs on the ingredient list, you have got to assume that that has gluten in it. And you'll be really surprised at items that will have breadcrumbs in it. Sometimes, like meat patties and stuff, they'll put breadcrumbs in it to hold it together. They'll do this because it has a higher level of fat content, right? So they can use the higher level of fat content if they put the breadcrumbs in there to absorb some of that fat. Anyways, different topic. The triticale, the name of that is a wheat that's been crossed with rye. And so you'll want to avoid this. This is just not gluten-free at all, ever. Brewer's yeast, just going back to the beer, it's not gluten-free. So you just have to assume that it's not gluten-free, but there might be some brands of brewer's yeast that are. Nutritional yeast is a totally different thing. Sometimes they, we use those interchangeably, but brewer's yeast is that product from brewing a beer, and it just is almost never gluten-free. If it's gluten-free, they will label it. Starch, again, just if it just says starch, you have to be really super careful with that because it could be coming from wheat. It's very likely that it's coming from corn or something else, but if it just says starch, not cornstarch, not tapioca starch or anything like that, just assume that it's wheat starch. Which is, wheat starch is only gluten-free if it's processed in the right way. So you just have to look for that gluten-free label. Granola. Granola is made with oats. Going back to that whole thing about oats, make sure that anything with oats in it is certified gluten-free. Don't just want the gluten-free label here. You really need to make sure it's got that certified gluten-free on there, okay? A roux, R-O-U-X. Roux is something that is, it's fat and flour mixed together and cooked to make a thickened sauce, right? So you have to assume that's made with wheat flour. So it's usually like butter and flour and like salt and pepper and stuff, and mixed up for like mac and cheese sauce or something like that. So if you see a roux on a packaging, just assume that it's got wheat flour in it. Brown rice syrup. This was a surprising one to me when I found out about this. I was like, what? It's brown rice. Like, it says brown rice, that brown rice syrup, that has to be gluten. They add malt to it. So, there are gluten-free ones, but you gotta check. All right, anything that says sauce, sauces are thickened and whew, dangerous. So anything that's thickened is going to have a potential of having gluten in it. There are many ways to thicken it without adding gluten, but without knowing what they're using to thicken it, if it just says sauce, you have to assume that has gluten. Broth or stock has to be labeled gluten-free. So broth or stock as an ingredient in something is very cautionary. You just don't know what they used to make that stock, whether it had gluten added to it or what. Including like spices and all that stuff. Sausage, there's some sausages that have those breadcrumbs added, so you just have to be careful with that, because sausage is not just meat, right? It's got the seasonings and the spices, and sometimes it's got those fillers in it too. So it's just one to be a lot more cautious of. Meat substitutes, just going back to that, saying that vegetable protein, seitan, all of that. These are just different names for this same thing, and just be really careful about those names. Imitation crab. Imitation crab is fish bound together with wheat starch or wheat flour. So it is not gluten-free. Some of them, you can find ones that are though. I love crab, and I like to just buy the real thing. Sometimes it's really expensive. And I have found some imitation crab brands that are gluten-free, so you can go out there and look for those, and that can work. Nuts. It's another one of those, right? So it's naturally gluten-free, but how it's processed has a high likelihood of having gluten. So I recommend anything nuts, you need to make sure that it has gluten-free. Licorice. The red licorice and black licorice, they have wheat flour as one of the ingredients in it. And so if you see licorice as an ingredient within another product, you just need to assume that it contains wheat flour. And the last few here are Latin names for products that have wheat. And so I'm going to try to pronounce them if I can remember my Latin pronunciation here, but they are not something you'll usually see on a food ingredient list. However, if you need to make sure your shampoo is gluten, these are the words that they're using instead of wheat, rye, barley, gluten. These are the words you're looking for. Okay, so the first one is triticum vulgare. All right. It just means wheat. Hordeum vulgare is barley. Secale cereal, or it looks like cereal, and that's just Latin for rye. And then avena sativa is oats. And so again, just going back to the oats, being really cautious with those. And so that's the end of my list here, and it was a long long list here. I am going to link the article down below. There's some more explanations in the article as well. And you can just look through that and keep that as your list, just to double check on everything. And I know that there's probably some things that I left off of here, and there are probably more items to add, but this was a big item on that list. Obviously, I didn't put things on here like wheat, barley, rye. I don't feel like those are the hidden ingredients. It's all of these other ones around it that you just wouldn't think of. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful, and that this will help you when you're looking at your ingredients and looking at these products to determine whether it's a safe product for you and your family. All right, everyone. You have a great day, and I will hopefully see you around here next time. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe if you would like to get more of this type of content. Bye.